evening. My name is Judith Rose, and I'm the Deputy Cultural Counselor of the French Embassy in the US and Deputy Director of Villa Albertine, France's new cultural institution, reinventing artists' residencies and creating a network for arts and ideas spanning France and the United States. We are very happy to welcome you here this evening as we come together to celebrate the publication of Bernard-Marie Koltès' 7 plays, the first collection of his major plays translated in American English. Yes. Bernard-Marie Koltès, one of the most emblematic French playwrights of the 20th century, is sadly no longer with us, but his poetry and lyricism continue to be a source of inspiration for audiences around the world. We're always happy to celebrate the translation of the works of contemporary French playwrights, particularly when these translations are being published. So I would like to thank the Segal Center team, including Frank Henschker, its director, Amin Irfani, the translator and editor, the actors here, and all the members of the incredible team who kept Koltes' voice alive here in the US and who remained so dedicated to this project. I would also like to thank our team in the arts department, as well as our partner, Face Foundation, for their continuing support in bringing Koltes' work to the United States. Thank you all for being with us, and I wish you an excellent evening. I'll now turn the floor to Frank for the introduction of the publication. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Judith, for this beautiful introduction, and thank you to Villa Albertine and the French Cultural Services for being the host in this beautiful space, also in a sunny day. It is a nice and beautiful day for us. It is actually the first live event we're doing since 2 years. So there are many friends and colleagues I have not seen in 2 years, so thank you all for coming, and we would really like to thank the French Cultural Services who have been such a fantastic, long-standing partner going back over decades, and their work here in New York City, I think, is an example of how cultural exchange, also called cultural diplomacy, but I do think this truly is a cultural exchange that teaches us that art is important, that it has a place, that it reflects us, it shows who we are as our captivity, but it's also something that makes us think who we are in our lives, our families, our relations, in our cities, in our countries, but also in the world. And as we know, with the state of Ukraine, someone said that the opposite of war is not freedom, it's actually creativity. And what we do tonight, I think, is part of this. And I would like to thank the French Cultural Services for being such a great institution here in New York City. We work with 20 plus organizations in our work at the Tikal. It's extraordinary, I think, what France does and how they support the work of artists and also hide the significances they post on it, and then they also going forward with a progressive way of justice, of peace, and of learning. I would like to thank my colleagues Tikal and Laurent, who have worked so wonderfully with me. We know Laurent is going soon in August, so we're going to miss him. But also, Tikal, is it true for you? It's your first event in 2 years. Do you want to say a word? Come on, say something. She is always making. I've been working for such a long time in New York City. Tikal is an extraordinary cultural worker. She's not as regular as she really should be. Please come and say a few words and say, well, how does it feel? Is it really your first event since 18?
Since 2018 for the performing arts. As you know, performing arts has been pretty affected by the pandemic, so just thank you very much. I'm very happy that you're here to keep Koltes' voice alive in the United States. So thank you very much. It's a truly extraordinary work both she does and Laurent. Often in soccer terms, what happens in the midfield, the little tiny things that if you use the ball or not,
That's when a goal, you get one, and you win one, or you lose one. It's little invisible things, the details. And I think Nicole and Laurent and everybody here is also looking for excellence, and we really highly respect it. I would like to thank our co-hosts tonight. We are live streamed nationally, and often we have viewers over 10, 20 countries. I know we have international viewers on howlround.com. It's a non-profit US national streaming service for theater, non-profit theater hosted at Emerson College. Fantastic institution. I encourage you all to look at their work. I would like also to thank Chris Silsby, who's with us here. He did the design for the book. I hope you will get it. It's $35, and tonight we got it for $20. It costs us actually the money to print it, but I think tonight you are real Koltes fans. You came here, put your life at risk, and you should be rewarded. I'm serious, yes, it is true. So thank you all. Now we are going to come to the evening itself. I would like to ask my colleague, and I hope I can also say my friend Amina Fani, my colleague at CUNY, at the great Lehman College, and we have colleagues here from the Lehman College also with us, which shows this is a functioning institution, because in some university people never go if their colleagues do something, you know. And so, I mean, why don't you tell us a little bit about Koltes?
Thank you everybody for coming and for the courage to come here today indeed. Before I speak about the book, I need to give due time thanks to a number of people and make a number of enemies, because I won't have time to thank everybody. First of all, I want to thank Jean Cocteau, the brother of Bernard-Marie, whose friendship and trust really made this book happen. This book has been for many, many, many years into the making, and we'll get into this. Thank you also, Frank, of course, Frank Henschke, who is the director of the Martin Segal Theater and the head of the Segal Publications. I could not think of a better publishing house than Frank's, because he totally understands and grasps the stake of this book. Thank you, of course, Villa Bertine and the French Cultural Services for your hospitality. Thank you, Marion, for all the work you've done. Marion started a Koltes festival almost 20 years ago, 2003. Yes. And 3 of the translations in this book, early versions of them, were from that festival. I do want to thank one other person who's not here with us, who's a very close friend of mine, and Ismail Connor. Ismail, if you're watching us, you should be here. A very extremely talented actor who encountered Koltes in 2003, also I believe in 2006, did another festival in Atlanta that lasted 6 years, and we owe him a lot too. Although his translations were not in this book, his talent made it happen. I want to, of course, name the translators, right? Marion Chauvard, Anna Müller, Teresa Weber, Andy Bragan couldn't be here, unfortunately, today. Michael Atias, who's a jazz musician, he's in Berlin, jazzing up right now, so he won't be able to be here. So this collection, as I said, really is a collaborative work, and it's a work of love. When I say this, I really mean it. People who work on Koltes, who read him, who stage him, who write on him, who study him, they truly develop a love relationship with him. And that's for that very reason the community of Koltes, the Koltes community, is big and getting stronger every day. I know that some people are watching from France and stuff. So yes, Koltes has been translated in over 30 languages, staged all over the world. One of the playwrights who's been most staged outside of France. And we are making the point of making this book to give it new momentum for the English-speaking world. And this is not the first translation of Koltes. in English, this is what we could say a second attempt. We can take into, we will talk about why we thought that this book was necessary, to give it really a second attempt. What I try to do as an editor here is to provide English-speaking readership, artists, context. There's a very long introduction to the book. There's a quite substantive biographical account of Koltes at the end of the book. And I try to really give access to all the material in French that are not accessible if you don't speak French. So I hope that this really gives a new force for Koltes studies, for the production of Koltes, for the new Koltes readership in the US.
But it's a definitive anthology, at least for the next 20 years. I think translation should be done every generation, new, but this is a treasured one, I think. It has been reworked and also to re-translate the big ones, the big plays. And for everybody knows who Koltes is, but if not, it would be as if Tony Kushner, would have his evening in Paris, and people would say he's actually an important playwright in the US. So, but now we come to our evening. We're going to present you 7 excerpts, but don't be scared, short ones. We were wrestling, should we do one full one? Should we create a little tiny festival? But we didn't know how Corona came out. So we thought, why not have, in the sense of Rauschenberg, the great idea, the American idea of the collage. Why don't we collage excerpts and see how they listen to each other? They all talk to each other. And we have a fantastic group of actors with us. Amin also put this together as the director. We have one actor missing, the great Carl Hancock Rocks. I don't know if anyone who knows him. He's going to be actually the Count of Venice Biennial. He's a Lincoln Center Justice with Mary Caribbean. He did works, but he seems he had corona. He cannot speak, so he's at home at 4 o'clock. He said, I'm terribly sorry, but I cannot come. But believe it or not, Amin, next to me, the translator and editor, said, okay, I can also say he knows the words. They are treasured words, they are sacred words, and we did not want to give them away to someone like me or someone else. So he doesn't really, he knows that. So we're going to have those excerpts, then Amin and I will talk a little bit, and then going to ask the translators to come with us, have an open conversation. Again, we really would like to thank you, the audience. It's what has been missing so much in our work, and that you take the time to come and listen to work most probably you already know about, to come to celebrate a book that has been, I think it was Jackie Kennedy who said, if you did one book in your life already is meaningful. So we celebrate this. We celebrate books in a time where it's complicated. There's like the French Embassy, they created also a bookstore. We have a high respect for that. In that bookstore. So this means really a lot to us this evening, besides the fact that it hopefully signals the beginning of a post-corona or the time after corona. We're going to start with the night just before the forest. But let me tell you some quotes. I put some together for me. So Koltes cannot be with us, as Julius told us he was too young. Koltes said about theater a lot. And he said, I like my job as a writer because it is inessential. Making theater is the most superficial, useless thing in the world. And as a result, I want to do it in perfection. Is that you develop an astonishing relation with language in a foreign country. I write differently, for instance, in New York than in Paris. I had a very strong relation to New York City, and we will talk about this later. He said, you take a particular pleasure because you are alone. A word itself has no meaning. For meaning to appear, there needs to be an accumulation of words, a rhythm, a music. Music produces meaning. An isolated word does not. So now we come to the night before the forest, and Amin put together beautiful descriptions, which he was supposed to read before he became one of our performers. So that we want to give a little context. The night, just before the forest, is a one-sentence monologue, and it made him famous overnight, of of over 10,000 words. So one sentence was 10,000 words, with no period at the end, written in a very rhythmical and musical way. Koltes compared it to a fugue by Johann Sebastian Bach. Written in 77, Koltes considers it the beginning of his true dramatic body of work. About the play here, a homeless man approaches you at a street corner, half drunk. He asks you for a light for a cigarette, for money to buy a coffee or a beer, for a room to sleep at night, and most foremost, for love. And we have Armin with us who will read the words.
I ran after you. The moment I saw you turn the street corner, despite all the pricks left in the streets, in the cafes, in the basement of the cafes, here, everywhere, despite the rain and the wet clothes, I ran, not only for the room, not only for the part of the night for which I need a room, but I ran, so that this time, turning the corner, I don't find myself in the street empty of you, so that this time, I don't find only the rain, so that this time, I find you on the other side of the corner, and I dare shout, brother, I dare grab you by the arm, brother, I dare approach you, brother. It was, I dare approach you, brother, I dare grab you by the arm. Give me a light, that'll cost you nothing, brother. This nasty rain, this nasty wind, this fucking intersection. There's nothing good in walking around here tonight, for you or for me. But I don't have any cigarettes. It wasn't really for a smoke. And then I said, give me a light, brother. It was, brother, to tell you. This fucking neighborhood, this fucking habit of walking around here, way to approach people. And you walk around, your clothes soaking wet, taking the risk to catch any possible disease. I'm not asking you for a cigarette either, brother. I don't even smoke. It will cost you nothing. No lights, no cigarettes, brother, no money. Then you walk away. 20 bucks don't make a difference for me. Not tonight. And besides, I've got enough to buy us coffee. Let me treat, brother, instead of walking around in the streets lights. So it costs you nothing that I've approached you. Maybe I have my way of approaching people, but in the end, it costs them nothing. I'm not talking about a room, brother, a room to spend the night, because then the nicest guys have their mouths shut. You'd walk away. Let's not talk about a room then, brother. But I have an idea to tell you. Come, let's not stay here. We'll catch something, for sure. No money, no job. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make things easy for me. I'm not really looking for one. I'm not looking for a job. It's not really that. It's that I have this idea first that I must tell you. You and me walking around here in the street, in the city, with no money in our pockets. But I'll buy you coffee, brother. I have enough. I'm not taking that back. Not now. Because on the first impression, it's not the money. It's not you or me that keeps us nailed to the ground. So me, I've got this idea, brother. It's for our defense. Only for our defense. Because that is really what we need to defend ourselves, right? Maybe you think, not me, but then let me tell you, maybe I'm the one who approached you. I'm the one who needs a room tonight. No, brother, I didn't say I did. I'm the one who asked, brother, give me a light. But the one who approaches is not always the weak one. And I saw right away from there that you didn't look very strong, walking around all wet, not very tough at all. While me, Despite all this, I'm resourceful and mean. I recognize those who aren't very strong.
Koltes wrote, "It is true that today the blood of our people is black and Arab. There's new blood because of the presence of black and Arabs. There's new blood in the heartland of France, which is a desert. There, no life exists. And if anything happens, it is always thanks to immigrants." Come to the second reading, the Battle of Blacks and Dogs. In 1978, Koltes was invited to join a friend to Lagos, Nigeria, to a French construction camp. During his stay, one of the white engineers kills a black construction worker, it's a real event, and throws his body in the sewers. The worker's name was Mofia. Appalled, Koltes writes a play here called Battle of Blacks and Dogs, in which the character Algori walks into a French construction camp to reclaim the body of his murdered brother. Horn, the head of the camp, cannot find the body and tries to offer money instead. As a businessman, Horn does not understand why Algori will not accept money and why he will not forget about his brother. And we're going to have Michael Wiener as Horn, and Crystal will read for us, and her name is Crystal Maria, and Crystal Maria Stewart.
But why are you being so stubborn for such a little thing? I told you I'd give you compensation.
Often what little people want is a very simple little thing. But this little thing, they want it. Nothing will change their minds. They'd willingly die for it. Even if you killed them, even dead, they'd still want it.
Who was he, Albert? And who are you?
A long time ago, I say to my brother, I can feel the cold. He says, that's because there's a little cloud between the sun and you. I say, how can this little cloud make me freeze when all around me people are sweating and burning in the sun? My brother says, I'm freezing too. So we warmed each other up. Afterwards, I say to my brother, but when will this cloud disappear? When will the sun warm us too? He says, it won't ever disappear. This little cloud's following us everywhere we go. It will always be there between the sun and us. And wherever we went, I could feel it following us, with people all around, naked and laughing in the heat. My brother and I, together we froze and gave each other warmth. And so, under this cloud that took the heat away from us, my brother and I warmed each other up. And we got accustomed to each other. If my back itched, I'd have my brother scratch it, and I scratched his whenever his back itched. Worry made me bite the nails on his hand, and he'd suck the thumb on my hand in his sleep. The women we took clung to us. Soon they were freezing too. We were all so close and tight under the cloud that we kept each other warm. We got so accustomed to each other, one man's shiver would ripple across from one end of the group to the other. Mothers joined us, and mothers' mothers, and their children, and our children, a multitudinous family from which not even the dead could be torn away. That's how close and tight we kept them, under the cloud that took the heat away from us. The little cloud had risen towards the sun, taking the heat away from a family that was getting larger and more accustomed to each other all the time. A multitudinous family, made up of bodies, either dead, alive, or soon to be alive, each one more necessary to the other as we watched the borders of the earth, still warmed by the sun, get further away. That's why I'm here, asking for my brother's body that was torn away from us, because his being gone breaks the closeness that kept us warm. Because even dead, we need his heat to keep us warm, and he needs our heat to preserve his.
We're having difficulties understanding each other, sir. I think, however hard we try, living side by side will always be difficult.
They tell me in America, blacks go out in the morning and whites in the afternoon.
Is that what they tell you?
Thank you. This was Battle of Wives and Dogs, translated by Michael Matthias. Now we come to the next reading, West Piers. Koltes lived and loved New York. He lived here, and he wrote, "I didn't have the time to dream about Paris. I immediately dreamed and dreamt about New York. In New York in '68, it was really a different world. It was truly like no other city in the world. It was like a big bag where you put everything that could not fit anywhere else." About the play West Pier, Koltes falls in love with New York City at the age of 20 and compulsively returns to the city throughout his life. He spends a great amount of time in the abandoned West End piers of Manhattan by the Hudson River, where the gay community thrived until the end of the 70s and early 80s. But the mayor of New York, Ed Koch, cleans up the city in the early 80s, closing bathhouses and destroying the abandoned West Piers, all hubs for the gay community. To take revenge, Koltes writes West Pier in '83. In it, the mayor features as a character as a bankrupt tycoon who is driven by his secretary to an abandoned warehouse by the river, inhabited by a community of homeless migrants who, by the end of the play, take revenge on Koch. At the start of the play, Maurice Koch is returning to the place of his childhood, at the abandoned piers where he grew up in a lower-class household, to commit suicide. Monique, his secretary, does not know the reason why Maurice forced her to try to this decrepit warehouse. West Pier, translated by Marion Cheval Teresa, Weber, that was here, with Josefina Scaro as Monique.
What about me? What should I do? I can't leave you alone here, and I can't live without you because I'm the one who knows how to drive. I'm the one responsible for bringing you here. And you can do anything by yourself with your freaking boat that might not even exist anymore. Really? You look like a fool. You could at least leave the street lights on. We could see something. There's something slippery on the ground, and I don't know what it is. You know, in my family, I was notorious for my ability to see clearly in the dark. They even quit locking in the basement to frighten me. But I never seen this much darkness before. I should never have left the keys in the car. That would be the icing on the cake. If someone steals it, Christ! It would take hours to get out of this place on foot, with no signs or street lights. Besides, Maurice, I think someone is watching us. I'm sure of it. There used to be streetlights here. It was a normal, vibrant, middle-class neighborhood. I remember it very well. There were parks with trees. There were cars, cafes, and shops. There were old people crossing the streets, children in strollers. The old warehouses were used as parking lots and flea markets. It was a neighborhood for artists and retired people, an ordinary and innocent world. It wasn't that long ago. But today, Christ, it doesn't matter who. The most innocent person who gets lost here in the middle of the afternoon could be slaughtered in broad daylight and their bodies thrown into the river without anyone even thinking to look for them here. And why? Because rents are too low. They should have encouraged the landlords to raise their rents. They should have been forced to raise them, even if they didn't want to. The roaches, the rats, and the roaches have infiltrated this place like conquering soldiers. The walls, the landlords have left the walls cracked. The broken windows haven't been replaced. The old people died. So finally the merchants were forced to flee the neighborhood. And today, all these buildings, miles of street lined with buildings, aren't worth a cent. Not a nickel to anyone. Nothing at all. Nothing. It's disgusting. God knows what is here now. God knows what's watching us. Let's go, Maurice. You aren't saying any word. You aren't saying a word anyway, and I don't intend to talk to myself all evening. Let's go. The engine is running. Don't go over there, Maurice. The ground is slippery, and you are not wearing proper dress shoes. Maurice? Maurice? This world is not for the living. Where are you? I can't see anything. I can't hear anything. The engine. I can't hear the car anymore. Don't leave me alone. Don't leave me alone. Maurice?
Thank you, that was bad English. Maurice. I have seen things so beautiful in Harlem, on the west side by the Hudson River, on the nights of New York. If I had enough talent to steal a piece of this beauty, I know I would be the most accomplished writer in the world in this century. It is a privileged corner of the world, these warehouses, the West End, like a mysterious neglected square in the middle of a garden where the plants would have grown differently. A place where normal order doesn't exist, but where a different order, a curious one, is created. Now we come to the Solitude of Cotton Fields. It is this playwright's second kind of New York play. In the abandoned West Piers of Manhattan, Koltes has witnessed a scene between two men, in which one attempts to sell something to another. But it soon becomes clear to Koltes that the seller has no merchandise and is instead begging for money. And in a truly unique and unparalleled language, Koltes staged a dialogue between a man being accosted by another in the street during twilight. The dealer attempts to sell something to the client, but stubbornly refuses to reveal his merchandise. Is it drugs, sex, or other goods? The client, feeling threatened, denies having any illicit desire, yet remains perplexed by what the dealer might have to offer. By the end of the play, nothing has been bought, nothing has been sold. We have witnessed a poetic battle of words between those two characters, a human relationship. And we have now with us Michael Wiener as the client, and Crystal Marie Stewart as the
At the very least, if it were true that you, the salesman, owned merchandise so mysterious that you refused to show them to me, or let me guess what they are, and that I, the buyer, have a desire so secret that I'm not aware of it, and that in order for me to see that I have one, I would need to scratch my memory like a scab, make it bleed. If that is true, then why do you keep your merchandise to yourself? Now that I have stopped? Now that I'm here? Now that I'm waiting? It's like those doormen at the striptease clubs who catch you by the elbow when you go home at night and whisper in your ear. She's here tonight. But if you showed them to me, if you gave a name to your offer, listed or illicit goods, but named and therefore submitted to judgment at the very least, if you named them for me, I would be able to say no, and would stop feeling like a shaken tree, rattled to its roots by an unpredictable wind. Because I know how to say no, and I like saying no. I am able to blow you away with my nose, to make you discover all the ways there are to say no, which begin with all the ways there are to say yes. Like the coquettes trying on all the dresses and the shoes, only to buy nothing in the end. And the pleasure they find in trying them on only comes from the pleasure they find in refusing them all. Make up your mind. Show yourself. Are you the brute, stumping on the pavement? Or are you a businessman? If so, lay out your merchandise first, and then we'll take the time to look them over.
It is because I want to be a businessman and no brute, but a real businessman that I will tell you what I possess or offer, because I cannot suffer a refusal, which is the one thing in the world a businessman dreads most, since it is a weapon he does not possess himself. But the more a salesman is decent, the more the buyer is deviant. All the salesman wants is to satisfy a desire he doesn't already know, while the buyer always trades his desire for the primary satisfaction of refusing what is offered to him. His unspoken desire is elated by the primary satisfaction of refusing what is offered to him. His unspoken desire is elated by the refusal, and he gives up on his desire for the pleasure of humiliating the salesman. But I am not the kind of businessman who shows the price tag to satisfy his client's inclination for anger and indignation. I am not here to give pleasure. Instead, I am here to fill the void of desire, to recall desire and force it to have a name. Drag it on the ground and give it shape and weight, along with the necessary cruelty involved in giving shape and weight to desire. Because I see yours like saliva spilling at the corner of your lips before you swallow it back in, and I'll wait for it to spill over your chin or wait for you to spit. And only then I will hand you a tissue to wipe yourself clean, because if I hand it to you, I know you would refuse it from me. And this is the sort of refusal I cannot bear to suffer.
great works of theater in the history of theater. I find it essential to travel after your studies, Koltes wrote. When you travel, you learn things that will remain useful your whole life. If you don't shove that in the face of an 18-year-old kid and the small space they occupy in the world, they will spend their lives thinking they're so very important and that their careers are so very important. If you learn this when you travel, when you're young, you won't forget your lesson. For me, when I was 20, it called everything into question. Now we come to Taba Taba. In the same poetic style as the Solitude of Cotton Fields that we just heard, Taba Taba is a very short play written in 1986. It stages two siblings and a Harley Davidson. We couldn't get it up the stairs. We really tried. But we got the motor of the Harley Davidson out. Instead of going out in the streets of Taba Taba, the brother Abu secludes himself in his backyard, referring to Phil, the beat-up Harley Davidson. His sister, Maimuna, scolds him for projecting a very bad image on her by defying social expectations. This is again translated by Amina Fari, and we have Marie Crystal Stewart as Maimuna, and we have Amin as Little Abu.
Why don't you go out at night when all the boys your age are already out in the streets, wearing shirts, the crease of their pants ironed out, prowling around the girls? All Taba Taba is out. All Taba Taba is primped up. The boys flirt with the girls, and the girls spend all day doing their hair. And my brother has got grease all over his paws, and he's fiddling with his machine. Shame on me. People are going to think I don't know how to iron a shirt. In the morning, instead of taking apart the machine's engine to put it back together in the evening, if you gave me your shirt to wash, your jacket to iron, the button of your pants to sew back on, I would not be humiliated in the evening when the other boys come and ask, "Where's he? Little Abu. Where's he, your brother? Where's our pal? We want to go out with him." Shame on me. He's right here in the courtyard with the dogs and the old ladies and the chickens with a nasty old rag in his hands. Wash up your mop or I'll slap you. Make dreadlocks, braid your hair, shave your skull, give me your shirt. Stop being my shame. In the evening, when the women next door come with their stuck-up faces, Fatumata especially, and ask, "Your brother? Where's he then, our darling? Where's he? Little Abu." What can I tell them? He's in engine oil. He smells like an old machine. There's buttons missing on his pants. Shame on me! Let go of this old rag. Pull your head out of the machine's butt. Do you think a girl would want to ride on this after spending all afternoon doing her hair? You don't even use it to get out. You only use it to stay in. How do you think that makes me look? My brother, a filthy brother among the old ladies, bent over his machine at the hour when everybody was out. How do you think that makes me look? At this hour of the evening and
I don't want to walk in the streets of Tabataba. They're full of dog shit. I don't want to drink beer at the juke joints. They're not even cold and they're bootlegged. I don't like the woman next door. They smell like chicken. And I don't like the way they do their hair and the way they dress. I prefer them in the morning when they prepare the meal. And as soon as night comes, I don't like my pals anymore. I like my bike and my paws full of grease and this filthy rag. I prefer my pants without buttons on them and my shirt wrinkled up. I like the old cold courtyards and the old people and the goats. A goat smells like a goat. I don't want to smell like chicken. I don't want to smell like meat. I want to choose my filth and stay in my courtyard. Leave my pals alone and forget about the woman next door. Don't stay here. I don't need you. Go away, Maimuna. When it gets hot like this, next to me to kill.
The advantage of the word brother, Koltes wrote, over all other words, is that it binds one person to another. It is that void of any sentimentality. It could be harsh, aggressive, fatal, almost uttered with regret. It also suggests irreversibility in blood, not the blood of kings, families, or races quietly contained in the body, and there's no additional meaning or color or value in the stomach or the spinal cord, but instead the blood that is drying on the sidewalks. We now come back to the desert, written in 1987, and it takes place in the provincial town east of France, reminiscent of Metz, where Koltes was born. This kind of desert he refers to, where Arab cafes actually were blown up by right-wing French activists in the 60s, under the supervision of the town's governor, the General Jacques Massoud. It's all true events again. At the beginning of the play, Mathilde, exiled to Algeria by a wealthy family during the war, returns to the town with two mixed-blood children to reclaim her part of the heritage from Adrian, her brother. Translated by Andy Bragan, and we have Ben Becher as Adrian and Josefina Sparrow as Mathilde.
Matilda! My dear sister, you've come back to our good little town. Have you come with good intentions? Now that age has mellowed us a little bit, we should try to avoid quarreling during your very short visit. During the 15 years you've been gone, I've grown accustomed, used to not quarreling. It'd be hard to start up again.
Adrian, my brother. My intentions are good. And if age has mellowed you, I'm happy to hear it. Life will be easier during my very long stay. In my case, age, instead of mellowing me, has put me on edge. And between your calm and my nerves, everything should be fine.
You wanted to escape the war, so naturally you came back to your roots, to your childhood home, and you did the right thing. Soon the war will be over. Soon you'll return to Algeria, to sunny Algeria. You'll have borne these uncertain times which affect us all here in this home.
My roots? What roots? I'm not a tree. I have feet. and the air I meant for the soil. And as for the war, my dear Adrian, I couldn't give a damn. I'm not here to escape the war. On the contrary, I've brought it with me to this good little town, where I have some old scores to settle. And if it's taken me so long to come back and settle these scores, it is because too much misfortune has softened my resolve. But 15 years without hardship has brought back the memories and the rancor and the faces of my enemies.
Enemies? Enemies, my dear sister? You? You're in this good little town. Distance has fed your imagination, which was never lacking. Loneliness and Algeria's hot sun have fried your brain. But if I believe you simply come back to look over your inheritance and then leave. Go ahead, look around. See how well I've taken care of things. Admire how I've improved the place. Once you've had a good look, touched everything, we'll prepare for your departure.
But I didn't come here to leave, Adrian. I've come with baggage and children. And I've come back to this house because I own it, improved or destroyed. I will always own it. I want to settle down in the place I own.
You own. You own, my dear Matilda. You own. Wonderful, wonderful. I've paid you rent. I've improved its value considerably, but so you own it. Very well. But don't start upsetting me. Don't start in with your tricks. Come on, why don't you make an effort? Let's start over with our hellos. We've gotten off to the wrong foot.
Then let's start over, my dear Adrian. Let's start over.
Now we come to our last reading. Famous Roaches. Koltes wrote, "This man, Roberto Zucco, killed for no reason." It's a play about a serial killer. This is why, for me, he is a hero. He completely matches the man of our century. And the way he commits his murders brings us back to the great mythologies. The admiration, the gaze of all the others towards him, because he was such a hideous temptation. The gaze, the admiration, that's what turned him into a hero. There are no heroes whose clothes are soaked in blood, and blood's the only thing in the world that cannot go unnoticed. What the play? In 1988, an Italian man, Roberto Zucco, murders his father, his mother, a police officer, and other civilians. Italy, Switzerland, and France issue warrants for his arrest. The wanted person posters can be seen all over Paris metro stations. The media and the public become obsessed by this young, handsome murderer. In his last completed play, entitled Roberto Zucco, Koltes stages the rise and fall of this mediatized assassin. In the following scene, Zucco hides from the police. At the night in a Paris metro station, there sink his posters just in the back of him. An old man who is lost on his way and was not able to exit the station before it closes down, finds Zucco sitting on a bench. Zucco does not reveal his identity, passes himself for someone else, and by the end of the scene, helps the old man out of the subway station. Translated by Anna Müller, and Ben Becker as Roberto Zucco, and Michael Wiener as the old man.
I'm an old man, and I've let myself stay out there than reasonable. I was so glad to have caught the last train, when suddenly, at an intersection in this maze of corridors and escalators, I couldn't recognize my stop. which I use so regularly, I thought I knew it as well as my kitchen. But I didn't know it hid behind the straightforward route I use every day a dark world of tunnels, of unknown directions that I would have preferred not to know. But my stupid absent-mindedness forced me to know. And then suddenly the lights turn off and leave all these little white sidelights whose very existence escaped me. So I walk straight ahead in an unknown world, fast as possible, which doesn't mean a lot for an old man like me. And when at the end of the station's endless escalators, I think I see an exit. Bam! Giant wire gate blocks access to it. So here I am, in quite a curious situation for a man of my age, punished by my absent-mindedness and the slowness of my gait, waiting for I don't know what. And I don't really want to know what, because such novelties are truly difficult to swallow at my age. But you, young man, whose legs seem very agile to me, and whose mind seems very clear, yes, I can see your clear gaze is neither blurred nor foolish, like that of an old man like me. It's impossible to believe that you let yourself get tricked by these corridors and these closed wire gates. No, even a closed gate. A young man with a clear mind like you could get through it like a drop of water through a colander. Do you work nights here? Tell me about yourself. That'll reassure me.
Oh, I'm a normal, reasonable young man, mister. Well, I've never stood out. Would I have stood out to you if I hadn't been sitting next to you? I've always thought the best way to live peacefully was to be as transparent as a pane of glass, like a chameleon on a stone, to go through walls, to have neither color nor scent, so that people's gaze go through you. And it sees the people behind you, as if you weren't there. It's a tough job being transparent. It's a profession. It's a very old dream to be invisible. Well, I'm no hero. Heroes are criminals. There are no heroes whose clothes aren't soaked in blood. And blood's the only thing in the world that cannot go unnoticed. It's the most visible thing in the world. When everything's destroyed, and only the thin fog of the end of the world covers the ground, there'll always be blood-soaked clothes. Of the heroes. I was a student. I was a good student. You never go back after being used to being a good student. I'm enrolled at the university. In the classrooms of the Sorbonne, my seat is reserved. With other good students, among them who I don't stand out. Nothing good changes the course of things, mister. I'm like a train that calmly passes a meadow and nothing can make go off the rails.
We can always go off the rails, young man. Yes. Now I know. Anyone can go off the rails at any time. And all that makes me really scared, young man.
There are things to to be scared of. You ready?
Thank you. I mean, why don't you come up and we're going to talk again. I think these actors did a great work. So. So it's been a while since we have seen a reading. So at least I did. So this is, I think, a great evening. And I always think, if you think of Koltes's work, like a common field or others, it's about human relations. Who's the dealer? Our relation, who's the dealer? Who's the client? What do you have to sell? Do you have any? What do you really want? Do you know what you want? If you don't know, do you know what you don't know? What you don't need? So that's why I think we also have this fascination for his work, because we really wrote, I think, about humans, about love, about relations, about our inner worlds. You worked over 10 years for that book. I mean, first of all, congratulations for really finishing the book, putting it all together, working with your collaborators, going again, work over it. But why is that book necessary?
Thank you, Frank. First, I want to acknowledge again that this is a collaborative work, and Marion and Daz are here, and it's really a pleasure to see you guys here. So there are a number of ways to answer this question. One of them being that, as you mentioned in reading those quotes, Koltes had a very special relationship in New York. Right? He came here when he was 20, and from that point on, he came back compulsively. He said that there are urges that he can fulfill here in this city that he cannot fulfill in other cities. Anybody who lived in New York could see that. Now, as I mentioned, Koltes has been translated in over 30 languages. He is still produced all over the world. Now the English translations have been lagging, and not translation, the productions. The productions of Koltes in English have been lagging in comparison with the other languages. Now, there are, I would say, maybe two reasons for this. There's been, in 2003, Marion here did a very big festival. I hope that will come up for us on top of that. So it's been 20 years. I mean, some of the translations here started 20 years ago and they've been worked through throughout these years. In the late 90s and early 2000s, there have been British English and British English translations that came out, and they did a good service to Koltes because they introduced Koltes into the English language. Now, the reason why the productions are lagging today in English may be said on the one hand that Koltes, as you may have heard tonight, has a very specific language that is quite different from what is done here in the US in terms of theater, or even in England in terms of theater. British theater, American theater, as you know, are mostly plot-based. The language is mostly naturalistic, not all of them, but the majority. And the characters were psychological. All of these are principles that Koltes worked against. And so Koltes's characters are not psychological, as we could see, for example, with Zugo, they're mostly almost like mythical. The language is utterly poetic, utterly musical, rhythmical, incantatory, invocatory, and the plots are, sometimes not there, as we saw with it. And what the heck was the dealer dealing? Nobody knows. But what he does really, he brings out conflicts, tensions that exist often in society and that are often repressed. he just brings them out and exposes them, but he doesn't resolve them, and they just are there, almost an explosion, and we have to deal with them. So there is no resolution often in those plays. So there is a, let's say, traditional difference between the American, British, and then the, we would say, French theater. But then again, French theater is not really a good way to explain Koltes, because Koltes' style is very unique also in France. Right? And you mentioned in the quotes, and it's important, that he is a typical writer-traveler. As in, these two things go together. And he often says that he writes in countries whose languages he doesn't understand, so that that obscurity kind of contaminates his writing.
Mm-hmm.
So his own writing becomes a bit foreign.
Tell us a bit, what did you struggle with? What is different in the translation with your team? And tell us some words or sentences. What is the essence you try to capture? How did you solve?
Absolutely. In order to answer that question, maybe I transition from your previous question to this one in saying that this translation, this book that we try to do, we try to do something different from the previous translations that were available in English. The previous translations, it's fair to say that they introduced Koltes to the English word, but at the same time they compromised on the language. And the language was rendered more naturalistic. There was slang where there wasn't any slang in French. For example, Koltes has this kind of magical ability to make something sound provocative or slang-like with the most clean French, with the most poetic French. And that's not just in British translation, and that's a tendency that often comes in translating Koltes. People often jump into slang where in fact there is no slang at all. And what we wanted to do, we worked together to go over line by line all the translations and make sure that we don't add to the text, but we bring about the musicality, the rhythm. Another trick, so this is answering your second question, another trick that he does that is really, that taught me personally quite a bit, is he repeats certain words, he repeats certain expressions almost compulsively through a play, or he ascribes some sort of repetitions to the character. But those repetitions, those words, may change meaning in a different context. So often translators, as a consequence, choose a completely different word for that different context to be more communicative. But no, this doesn't. And just through that repetition, he creates, again, rhythm, he creates a certain form of emotion. He transmits emotions through musicality and repetition. And that was really the most important aspect that we wanted to preserve in this book. And instead of adapting to British or American sensitivities, we try to do our best to present the work the way it is, as faithful as it is, because we think, I think we think that it really does something unique and it works in itself. You don't need to do that.
What surprised you in the long time? What did you learn?
Yeah, I mean, what I am describing here was an early kind of revelation for me. And I think that what I learned is, as one of the quotes that you read, for example, who says that there is no meaning in a word, there is meaning in the repetition of words, in the musicality. Music brings to meaning. And a word in itself has no meaning. And really, as a translator, but also as, not only as a scholar, because I write on Koltes on this matter, as a translator, but I have to say also, I started translating Koltes and the letters of Koltes came out in 2009, I believe. And in one of the letters, because he translated Shakespeare, and he writes that the reason why he started translating was to learn how to write, because there was no, like today, there wasn't any school where you would go to learn how to write. And I must confess that it was also kind of my approach to translation. Koltes taught me many things, including how to write. It was important.
Amazing. Maybe we're going to shortly ask our translators to join. We have Marion and Teresa and with us. Someone said the translating is also sometimes like a love affair. You can be faithful to the text, or you can betray it. You know, but sometimes, if you're faithful, it's a betrayal. Sometimes a betrayal can be faithful, and so it is quite something. So we're going to ask our friends, the translators, and we at the Segal plays truly a high and important value. So bring your chair. Yes. Okay, come here. And we need one more chair, maybe. Yeah. No, come here. Okay. Bring one more chair. Here. No, it's fine. So translation is of significance, it's important, it's often overlooked, it's a work of creation, and maybe, we'll tell us a little bit. How was it for you, the translation?
It was long. This is also over a decade of working on this text, and I just want to thank the actors for great work with it tonight. It was such a joy to get to hear it stage. I fell in love with Koltes the first time I read him in college, and I basically haven't stopped working on him since. As a translator, as a scholar. And Amin has, in some papers and conferences together, talked about the strangeness of Koltes's language. That's definitely something that attracted me to him, is how he both builds a sort of strangeness in the language. He makes words that are familiar to us feel somehow different, like we're losing touch with what they mean, and then brings it back in this repetition is essential to poetry.
Tell us a bit about your relation to
Is this on?
Yeah.
I'm an interloper up here. I stumbled into this translation through this beautiful woman over here who I did theater together with her in Iowa, where I was in college and she was there, not in college, and we both ended up in New York in the 90s. And so I think we were both about 23 years old at that point. And Mario said, maybe we saw In the Loneliness of the Cotton Fields together at BAM. And she became obsessed with doing a production of Koltes and bringing Koltes to New York. And she said, I want to translate this play, you should help me translate this play. And I was like, sure, what the hell, I'll translate this play with you. I was an English major, I studied French in high school, I do not speak French. I was just and I translated Marion very well, I think. But we just sat in a cafe many hours together, and I learned Koltes from this woman, and everything you said, it's very emotional because it was a long time ago, but the language is so true because she was so determined to keep the language true to the tone and that it wasn't natural. And she would try to tell me, this is what he's saying. And I would say, well, tell me in French. Is it formal? Is it slang? What does it seem to you in French? And she would describe it in French, in English to me, and then we would decide on the correct English words. I mean, that was literally the process line by line as we did it. Is that your recollection? I'll let you
often it's great to translate in collaboration. We encourage it. Often when we have texts, also we often ask a New York playwright to go over it at the very, very end. But Marion, why Koltes? Why did you choose him to be such a big part of your life?
Well, it's a long affair, very long affair. I guess Koltes for me is, I'm a theater director, so I approach translation from a director's point of view, because there are many different ways to translate. there are literal ways, there are scholar ways, there are poetic ways, there are many different ways, and every way has to be translated in 10 years because language, culture changes, people change. So my approach, I'm a theater director, and that was my love, the Koltes world is more abstract for me and more, how do you say from the stomach? It's guts. It's streets, it's dirt, it's sex, and it's all beautiful at the same time. It's very elegant and very eloquent, but at the same time, it really digs into human tribes. So that's what I loved about Koltes. And when I went to see Patrice Chéreau in Solitude of Cotton film, which was absolutely fantastic. That's when I decided I want to live in the city and I want to do Koltes. And that's how it started in '95. Then we did Westfield, and I directed 3 plays of Koltes: Westfield, Taba, and In Solitude of Cotton Field. And then in 2003, with many translators, we started to do the translations, and I have to mention, the Ohio Theater, and Louis Morescu, and in parentheses, my company, and then we presented these new plays in the entire, basically, work of Koltes. And then the rights were pulled off, so we did unplug Koltes with you. And then Amin came along, and he was strong enough and visionary enough to pull it off. So that was a very wonderful thing that happened to Koltes today. So thank you so much.
Maybe we ask everyone, because I know we haven't did that. Many of you did not know Koltes, and one says every generation, every 20 years, one has to retranslate it anyway. So, Amin starts moving 20 years, people will say about this book, well, what they did in this book, it has to be different. But I don't know if any one of you wants to say how did it feel?
I thought it was really fun. I was telling them that it's sometimes when you do like experimental or abstract stuff, it can be frustrating because it doesn't feel like it's about anything. But this didn't feel like that. Like you're right, it wasn't like super plotty, but that didn't really matter because I could always tell, at least for me, what the character was trying to get from the other person. And as an actor, that's all I need to know to do a scene. You know what I mean? Whereas it wasn't like one of those like weird plays where it's like, and then there's an egg that falls from the sky, and then you have to make it be about something. This wasn't one of those. So I had a lot of fun with it. I don't know if you guys.
I'm writing a play about an egg that falls from the
Well,
sky.
no. Well, hope it's fun. I'd like to read it.
And thanks Frank, and thanks Amin and the French Cultural Services, Nicole, for having us here. And really thank you to everyone that showed up. Without you, we can't do anything. It's all about this shared space, so keep on going out to readings and support. What came across to me while we did this process, and more when I hear Frank, Amin, and the other translators talk about Koltes, is the universality of his work. I guess what first piqued my interest was his connection to New York City, but more and more it seems we're all looking for some kind of, further understanding, and that's really what's coming up the most to me. There's specific things about the way he writes that are exciting and that are visceral. But the most thing that came up for me are these universal subjects that Koltes talks about that I think we obviously all relate to. That's why we're all in this room together. And that's what I would like to keep on pushing out there and supporting.
And thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Amin, and thank you so much, Frank, and everybody from the French Embassy. I'm going to be very short. For me, everybody wanted to honor the language, and it's my second language, so I was like, oh my god, how would we do this?
but I really loved it, and it's very poetic but very grounded, and also remind me a bit of Borges, which is not so grounded, but there's something of the repetitions, and that it reminds me of Borges.
Just to punctuate Jose's thoughts, I'm taken by the mystery of the work. I think we can try to frame it as one thing or another thing. We can say it's plotty or not plotty. I'm not so sure. I mean, I feel like there's plenty of narrative in Koltes's work. I feel obviously there's a great deal of poetry. I think I hear a little bit of. I mean, I think like any sort of truly singular canonical writer, you could compare that there are echoes of other. I mean, to me, there's a little Chekhov in there. There could be a little Beckett. There could be a little. You know, there's other sort of inflections to his work, but at the end of the day, he's poetic, but he's also he's talking about authenticity. He's talking about humanity, and he's very much grounded. He is grounded in a certain way. He's palpable. He's visceral. He's hitting things, and I think that there's plenty for us to do as actors as well in this work, and it can really there can be a real interactive quality to it. It doesn't have to be out of the sky. I think there's a real earthbound quality to it as well.
So maybe since we're a little bit up in town, we open it to those. It looks like the most intelligent audience I've seen in 2 years. And anyway, it is actually. So are there a couple of questions or comments? And put up your arm, number one. And someone else? What would we start? Number two, you? We start with songs.
Thank you for all of this, and I mean for bringing Koltes to the world. I guess my question has to do with Koltes as a very gay writer, and somehow tonight he came off as straight. And if you have some comments, I mean, dans les chants de Cocteau, it's a scene of divine. And I guess, you know, if you had the choice of, you know, how you chose the actors tonight, but I mean, I felt like I was watching a straight writer, and it certainly wasn't.
This is one of the major questions of Koltes, and I'm not going to take like 30 minutes to answer this, although I should. So in the book, I addressed that in the introduction of the biography. The point, so Koltes, especially you refer to the Solitude play, and the Solitude play really started becoming famous after the third production that I believe Marion was referring to in 95, by Chéreau and Pascal Grégory. And by that time, Koltes was dead. And before the second production, Chéreau already played it, and it was already, Koltes wasn't happy about it. He wasn't happy because Chéreau was trying to pretty much do what you're describing. It was trying to emphasize the, what he called the homoerotic relationship between the characters, but for him, it wasn't about a certain kind of sexuality. It was mostly, almost entirely about the notion of desire, which comes in the text almost like impulsively. I don't know how many mention of the word desire is in that text. And he addresses that in one of the interviews, in which he says that I'm quoting more or less, paraphrasing, that my homosexuality doesn't define, is not a strong enough pillar for my writing, but desire is. And the notion of desire for him runs across forms of sexuality, including the Taba Taba, the short play Taba Taba, is somewhat controversial because a certain form of sexual desire, including between siblings. So really, it's not just about, for him, it's not just about, although in his life he was very much freed by the game, especially in New York. In Paris, it was a little bit too late for him because it already happened in New York and he lived it in New York. But it never translated into his work. And the only reason Chéreau, I believe that Chéreau himself talked about it, the only reason Chéreau could do this third production with putting so much emphasis on the eroticism between the two men is because Koltes was there. Because he would not have approved of it. And he didn't say it, he wouldn't approve of it. Yeah.
So I think we have two more questions.
I think this question would lend itself towards the performers to a certain degree. One of the things that I love about Koltes and what comes forward in the readings today is that even when he has two people on stage, or he's writing dialogue, he's actually kind of writing monologues for the second performer to respond. So there are like three waves of language that are happening. There's his language, there is the second performer's response to the language, and then there's like a dialogue, and then that goes to the audience. So I'm just very interested, well, I'm grateful to have been able to see that stage tonight. And I guess the question would be for the directors and the performers, how the time that it takes to actually work with Koltes' language so that you can have that immediacy of response and then get that wave to the audience who will then be the third receptor of the scene.
I'm going to let the actor respond. I'm just going to quickly respond for them that these are excellent actors. I mean, the amount of time that we had was so short, and the work that these people did was so great.
Thanks for the question. I'll try to address it. If we aren't, let us know. I'm saying we're not on track. In terms of the time, we just tried it out. It's for all of us, as saying, give as much as we can to everyone here, whatever the amount of time it is. Realistically, behind the scenes, you're lucky if you get a few hours of rehearsal with this. It's just the nature of the beast and logistics. We were able to sit down for a couple of hours, but other than that, it's showing up the day of, like all my peers here, and just doing the best that we can, trusting each other. That's the technical part of it. In terms of the monologues, I don't have anything interesting to say. And not that I've said anything interesting earlier. We're just have the words and try to communicate action. We had a nice discussion about emotions and tones that Koltes tries to evoke, sometimes with the repetition, many things that were repeated, that were mentioned here. But for us, we were talking, but for us in life, when we talk even now, there's psychology going on, but we're not aware of it probably. It comes out in our behavior and what we're doing because we want something. Like now I want to try to give you the best answer I can. So that's as interesting as it gets, I think, for us. We don't look, it's good.
Maybe one last question. We're going to have a reception afterwards. We can talk about much.
Just want to add something.
Oh, yes, Mario.
There's also a character in Westpierre that doesn't speak throughout the entire play. And it doesn't mean so that's another language. So that's an acting language. How do you fill out 2 hours of non-speaking being present in every scene? And the other thing I can tell you is that with Solitude, which I directed, we worked on conjunction. It's long monologues and because, and because, if this is how we worked, the choreography and the tempo was just through these words, and that was a very hard and long work.
I'll just jump in really quickly to share a famous quote from an interview that Koltes did, where the interviewer asked him to talk about solitude as a dialogue, and he said it's not a dialogue, it's a monologue.
Can I say one little thing? So for me, there were 2 things that Amin mentioned, was the repetition and rhythm. But also you mentioned something about disattachment, right? Or like in terms of the acting that Koltes used to, and that also stayed in my mind.
Yes, there's this famous quote at the end of West Pier when she says that actors should play the text as a little boy who's in front of his classroom and he needs to pee. And that he just tells his text thinking that, oh, I have to go, and then suddenly he runs off to the bathroom. So he knows psychology.
Last question.
So I guess as far as the book, how does it relate to other books of his work, and like how complete is it?
Right, that's a very important question. These are the 7, what he himself calls the corpus, his quote-unquote real corpus, right? So after he passed away, there were a number of other previous texts that came out. They were very valuable. They're not included in the book. These texts, the ones that are here, are the 7 plays that he himself basically describes as being his major dramatic works. Now, hopefully there needs to be more of this coming out. The interviews are amazing. The letters are amazing. The previous plays, some of them are absolutely fantastic. Again, this book, as I tried to mention, tried to present a different approach to translation. At the same time, I tried to provide a lot of material that wasn't available to the English speakers. And I really hope that it really starts a certain form of not just scholarship, new scholarship on Koltes, but new productions.
So thank you all, thanks to the actors, thanks to Ami, the translators, you guys are certainly talking. Thank you all for you can get the book for $20 instead of $35. All the translators can sign. We have a little table. I want you to go over there. And there is a reception, the French Cultural Services. We are graciously prepare a reception. And also have a look at the bookstore and that. Thank you all for coming.